3 foods you think are real, almost certainly aren't. Honey. 76% of what's sold in supermarkets has been adulterated, cut with corn syrup, ultra-filtered to hide its origin, sometimes containing 0 actual honey. Maple syrup. That bottle in your pantry? Probably corn syrup with artificial maple flavoring. Real maple never touched it. Wasabi. 99% of what restaurants serve isn't wasabi at all. It's horseradish, mustard, and green dye. A completely different plant pretending to be something it's not. This isn't about premium versus budget. This is about knowing what you're actually eating. Because the food industry figured out something important. If you've never tasted the real thing, you'll never know you're being fooled. 3 foods, 3 levels of deception. And by the end, you'll know exactly how to tell the difference. Let's start with honey. Here's the thing about honey. It's not something bees collect. They make it. From scratch. Through one of nature's most sophisticated chemical transformations. It starts with nectar. Bees use their proboscis, a straw-like tongue, to suck up nectar. It's mostly water. About 70 to 80% water. If you tried to store it like that, it would ferment within days. The nectar goes into a separate stomach called the honey stomach or crop. It holds about 40 milligrams, the weight of a grain of rice. To fill it, a bee visits 50 to 100 flowers. One trip. Now here's where it gets wild. Inside the honey stomach, enzymes break down the nectar. Invertase splits complex sugars into glucose and fructose. Glucose oxidase produces hydrogen peroxide, giving honey its antimicrobial properties. When the bee returns to the hive, it passes the nectar to a house bee, a younger bee that stays inside. Mouth to mouth. The house bee chews on it for about 30 minutes, adding more enzymes. Then it deposits a tiny droplet into a honeycomb cell, but it's still too watery, about 70% water. Honey needs to be under 18% water or it will ferment. So the bees fan it. Thousands of bees beat their wings, creating airflow that evaporates the water. A biological dehydrator. They do this for hours, sometimes days. The hive stays around 35 degrees Celsius. Too hot and enzymes break down. Too cold and evaporation slows. Bees regulate temperature by fanning cool air in summer and clustering for warmth in winter. When the honey reaches 17 to 18% water content, the bees seal the cell with a wax cap. Honey found in ancient Egyptian tombs, 3,000 years old, was still edible. But here's what that actually means in terms of scale. A single bee produces 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in her entire lifetime. That's it, 1/12. To make 1 pound of honey, bees fly about 55,000 miles collectively. That's more than twice around the Earth. They visit roughly 2 million flowers, and it takes the work of about 300 bees over their lifetimes to produce a single pound. That's why real honey is expensive. That's why shortcuts exist. Now here's the kicker. Walk into any grocery store, look at the honey aisle. Most of it isn't honey. In 2011, Food Safety News tested honey from major U.S. retailers. 76% of samples contained no pollen. 0. Pollen is the fingerprint of honey. It tells you where it came from. Without pollen, it's not traceable. And often, it's not real. How do you remove pollen? Ultrafiltration. They heat the honey and force it through extremely fine filters. This strips out pollen, enzymes, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. What's left is sugar water with honey flavor. Why? To hide the origin. Most fake honey comes from China, where it's adulterated with corn syrup or rice syrup. Ultrafiltration erases evidence of where it came from. But wait, it gets worse. Some honey is made without bees at all. Factories blend corn syrup, sugar, water, and artificial flavoring. They add caramel color and thicken it with xanthan gum. It looks like honey. It tastes similar, but there are no flowers, no bees, no enzymes. In 2013, the U.S. Department of Justice charged 2 companies with importing $180 million worth of fake honey from China. They relabeled it to avoid tariffs and inspections. Honey laundering, that's a real thing. The economics make it irresistible. Real honey costs $4 to $7 per pound. Fake honey costs less than $1. When consumers can't tell the difference, why bother with bees? But here's the thing. You can tell the difference. Real honey crystallizes. If your honey sits in the pantry for months and stays perfectly smooth and liquid, it's probably fake. Real honey turns cloudy and solid over time. You can reliquefy it by warming it gently, but crystallization is a sign of purity. Real honey has pollen. Look at it under a microscope, and you'll see tiny grains. Ultra-filtered honey won't have any. Real honey is thicker. Put a spoonful on a plate. Real honey holds its shape. Fake honey runs like syrup. Real honey has complexity. It tastes different depending on what flowers the bees visited. Orange blossom is floral and citrusy. Buckwheat is dark and malty. Clover is mild and light. Fake honey tastes generic. If you want real honey, buy local. Go to farmers markets. Ask the beekeeper where it came from. Look for raw, unfiltered honey. It'll be cloudier, might have wax or pollen, and will crystallize. Those are good signs. Fake honey is still honey. Just diluted, makes honey adulterated, actually stretched honey to maximize profit. And the reason there's real honey in there somewhere, usually. Maple syrup is different. That bottle labeled pancake syrup or maple flavored, it can contain 0 maple. Not diluted maple. Not low-quality maple. No maple at all. Just corn syrup, artificial flavor, and caramel coloring designed to look like the real thing. At least with honey, you're getting some of what you paid for. Real maple syrup comes from exactly one source: maple trees, specifically sugar maples, though red maples and black maples work too. But here's the thing. You can't just tap a tree whenever you want. There's a tiny window, late February through early April. Temperatures need to dip below freezing at night and rise above during the day. This freeze-thaw cycle creates pressure that pushes sap out. And that sap, it's mostly water. 98% water, 2% sugar. Basically, flavored tree water. Producers collect this watery sap and boil it in huge shallow pans called evaporators. The pans sit over roaring fires in sugar shacks. The ratio? 40 gallons of raw sap makes just 1 gallon of finished syrup. 40 to 1. As the water evaporates, the sugar concentrates. The sap transforms from clear and thin to that deep amber color. Steam billows everywhere. Sugar shacks in Vermont and Quebec turn into sweet-smelling saunas during maple season. The syrup is done when it reaches 219 degrees Fahrenheit, 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. At that temperature, the sugar concentration hits 66%. Too little, and it spoils. Too much, and sugar crystals form. Now here's the kicker. That's it. That's the entire ingredient list. Maple sap. Nothing added, nothing removed except water. So what about those other bottles? The ones that cost $4 instead of 16? Pick one up, flip it over, read the ingredients. High fructose corn syrup, cellulose gum, caramel color, sodium benzoate, artificial flavors, and way down at the bottom, maybe 2% real maple syrup. Some brands contain 0 actual maple. 0%. Here's how fake syrup gets made. Manufacturers extract starch from corn, break it down with enzymes, and create high-fructose corn syrup. Cheap, shelf-stable, sweet. Then they add caramel coloring, cellulose gum to thicken it, artificial maple flavoring, and preservatives. Mix it together in industrial vats. Bottle it. Slap on a label with rustic imagery. Done. Fake syrup in hours. Compare that to real maple syrup. Weeks of seasonal work. 40 gallons of sap per bottle. But wait, isn't this false advertising? Here's the thing. These companies play by the rules. They don't call it maple syrup. They say pancake syrup or breakfast syrup. Maple in the brand name, sure. Maple leaves all over the label, but legally, not claiming to be pure maple syrup. Clever wordplay. And it works because most people don't read labels carefully. Let's talk numbers. Roughly 90% are imitation. Only 10% are real. Americans consume about 22 million gallons of table syrup yearly. But real maple syrup production? About 13 million gallons total. Most gets exported. Do the math. Most Americans have never actually tasted real maple syrup. Now here's the wild part. Indigenous peoples in North America were making maple syrup long before Europeans arrived. They'd slash V-shaped cuts into trees, insert reeds to channel sap, and boil it down in clay pots. Thousands of years of tradition. Fake syrup? Invented in the 1960s by food scientists looking for a cheaper alternative. 60 years versus thousands of years. And the imposter is winning. So why does real maple syrup cost 4 times more? Simple. Labor and time. Real maple syrup requires tapping thousands of trees during a short seasonal window, collecting gallons of sap, boiling for hours, weather-dependent. If temperatures don't cooperate, the sap doesn't flow. Some years, producers barely break even. Fake syrup? Mix ingredients in a factory? Bottle it. Ship it. Done in hours. No weather dependency. No seasonal restrictions. No trees required. Plus, corn syrup is dirt cheap thanks to government subsidies. The fake stuff wins on economics. The real stuff wins on everything else. Can you taste the difference? Oh yeah. Real maple syrup has complexity. It's sweet, yes, but there are notes of caramel, vanilla, even smokiness. Early season syrup, called golden, is lighter and delicate. Late season syrup, called very dark, is robust and molasses-like. Fake syrup, one-dimensional sweetness, thick, cloying, chemical aftertaste. The texture differs too. Real maple syrup is thinner. It soaks into pancakes. Fake syrup sits on top like a gelatinous blanket. If you've only had fake syrup, trying real maple syrup is shocking. It's lighter, cleaner. You can taste the depth instead of just sugar. How to make sure you're getting the real thing? First, look for pure maple syrup on the label. Not pancake syrup, not maple flavored. Pure maple syrup. Second, check the ingredients. There should be one ingredient, maple syrup. That's it. Third, expect to pay more. Real maple syrup costs $12 to $20 per bottle. If it's $4, it's not real. Fourth, check where it's made. About 70% comes from Quebec, the rest from Vermont, New York, and Maine. Fake maple syrup is corn syrup pretending to be maple. Same category, wrong ingredient. Wasabi is worse. What restaurants call wasabi isn't a fake version of wasabi. It's not even the same plant. It's horseradish, a completely different species, mixed with mustard and dyed green. That's like selling you a dog and calling it a cat. 99% of the wasabi you've ever eaten was a lie. Here's why. Real wasabi has been part of Japanese culture since the 8th century. Archaeologists found wooden tablets from the Nara period listing wasabi as medicine. Monks cultivated it in mountain temple gardens. By the Edo period, it became essential for sushi, not just for flavor, but for antibacterial protection against raw fish. The problem is simple. Wasabi refuses to cooperate. The plant needs constant flowing water between 8 and 20 degrees Celsius. It requires shade but not darkness, humidity but not stagnation. Even in ideal conditions, a single rhizome takes 18 to 24 months to mature. One wrong temperature spike, and the entire crop turns black. Traditional wasabi farms cling to Japanese mountain streambeds because nowhere else works. Here's what happens when you grate real wasabi. The pressure ruptures cell walls. This releases an enzyme called myrosinase. The enzyme attacks compounds called glucosinolates stored in the plant tissue. The reaction produces allyl isothiocyanate. That's the molecule responsible for wasabi's heat. But unlike capsaicin in chili peppers, this compound is volatile. It evaporates at room temperature. The moment you finish grating, a countdown begins. Peak spiciness hits around 5 minutes. By 15 minutes, most of the heat has vanished into air. This is why traditional sushi chefs grate wasabi tableside using shark skin paddles. Speed matters more than technique. Every second between grating and eating is flavor lost forever. Wasabi attacks differently than other spicy foods. Capsaicin from chilies binds to receptors on your tongue. The burn lingers for minutes. Allyl isothiocyanate takes a different route. It vaporizes and travels directly into your nasal cavity. Scientists call the receptor it triggers TRPA1. Some researchers nicknamed it the wasabi receptor. These same sensors detect smoke and tear gas. That's why wasabi feels like a sharp punch to your sinuses rather than a slow burn on your tongue. The sensation peaks in seconds, then fades completely. Real wasabi also delivers something capsicum doesn't. A brief sweetness appears first. Then comes herbaceous freshness. Finally, the heat. The whole experience lasts maybe 10 seconds before disappearing. So, if real wasabi costs $250 per kilo and disappears in 15 minutes, why does the fake version fool 99% of the planet? Because chemistry doesn't care about price tags. Horseradish belongs to the same plant family as wasabi. Both produce allyl isothiocyanate. Both trigger the exact same receptors in your nose. Your brain recognizes similar molecules and accepts the substitute. The profiles differ slightly. Horseradish creates harsher, more persistent heat. Real wasabi produces a cleaner spike that vanishes quickly. But here's the real advantage: stability. Mix horseradish powder with water and it stays hot overnight. For restaurants shipping paste across continents, that shelf life isn't a flaw. It's the entire point. Fresh wasabi rhizomes cost between $100 and $300 per kilogram in Japan. Export prices run even higher. Compare that to horseradish at roughly $5 per kilo. A single serving of real wasabi would add several dollars to your bill. Most diners won't pay that premium for a condiment. So 99% of restaurants outside Japan serve the substitute. Even in Japan, experts estimate 95% of restaurants use fake wasabi. Only high-end establishments where chefs grate fresh rhizome tableside serve the real thing. Neither version is objectively better. Fake wasabi delivers the aggressive nasal hit many diners expect. Real wasabi offers complexity, but subtlety. Different products for different experiences. The substitute isn't just horseradish. Check the ingredients on any tube of wasabi paste. You'll find horseradish, mustard flour, cornstarch, and green food coloring. Sometimes spirulina or spinach powder for a more natural tint. The actual wasabi content ranges from 0 to 3%. Labels can legally say wasabi because there's no international standard defining minimum content. In Japan, the processed wasabi industry created voluntary guidelines. Products marked Hon Wasabi Shiu contain at least 50% real wasabi. Products marked Hon Wasabi Iri contain less, but these labels only apply in Japan. Everywhere else, that bright green paste can contain no wasabi at all and still bear the name. Real wasabi appears pale green, almost grayish. The texture looks gritty from fresh grating. It's served in small amounts that get replenished because the chef knows it's fading. Fake wasabi appears bright neon green. The texture is smooth and uniform like toothpaste. It arrives in a neat mound that sits unchanged through your entire meal. The taste tells you everything. Real wasabi starts sweet, turns sharp, then disappears. Fake wasabi hits hard immediately and lingers with an almost chemical persistence. If your eyes water for 30 seconds straight, you're eating horseradish. If the sensation vanishes before you finish chewing, that's the real thing. 3 foods, 3 types of fraud. Honey gets diluted. Real product, stretched thin. Maple syrup gets imitated. Different ingredient, same color. Wasabi gets replaced entirely. Different plant, same name. The pattern is always the same. Real versions are expensive, limited, hard to produce. Fake versions are cheap, infinite, easy to scale. And if consumers never taste the real thing, they never know what they're missing. So how do you spot real? Honey. Look for crystallization. Real honey crystallizes over time. Fake stays liquid forever. Maple. Check ingredients. Real maple lists 1 ingredient, maple syrup, nothing else. Wasabi. Look for texture. Real wasabi is grated fresh, loses heat in 15 minutes. Paste from a tube is never real. You can't control what the industry does, but you can control what you buy. Now you know what to look for. That's the process.